What's going on, guys? It's Nick here. Finally, time to release the running back rankings. I've broken them up into tiers. You guys know I've said I like to do that. I don't like making like a top 250 or something. Just go into the draft with tiered rankings of position by position. Maybe you can make like a top 30 just to be sure that's who you want to draft. But let's get right into it. At the top, you see this yellow tier. That's tier 1. And these are the guys I consider elite above all the other tiers by a wide margin, because you see in the column that I have next to the tiers, I have what I have broken up into my overall rankings. I only did top 30. Like I said, that's kind of basically what I like doing. And then after that, I kind of put like a round you might be looking for them in. So if you look at like the next tier, it goes to 23, and then like third round, I'd be looking at Mark Ingram. But this first tier, I've broken them up. Fifth overall, because I have 4 wide receivers ranked 1 through 4, is Le'Veon Bell. He's a clear-cut number 1 running back in the league when he's healthy, and that's a big when. He's never actually played a full season, I don't think. He got hurt late twice, but you got to remember, 2 years ago, 1,300 rushing yards, 850 receiving yards, 11 total touchdowns, and he's 24. Like, he's not old. He's not deteriorated. He's going to be the best running back week in and week out. Doesn't matter the matchup if he's healthy. He just has to stay healthy. And on that offense, he'd put up huge numbers. So he's got to be the number 1 as long as he doesn't have an injury. Number 2, Todd Gurley. I have him at 6th overall in the rankings. 1 spot behind Bell as the second running back. And he's better in standard than PPR because he doesn't really catch many passes. But he has come out and said he wants to be more involved in the pass game. So he's been improving as a pass catcher. Last year, as a rookie, 1,110 touchdowns. He's the featured back. He's the focal point of this offense. And they really have nowhere else to look. They're going to have a rookie quarterback. They really don't even have like a wide receiver or a tight end or anything. It's just him. So they're going to give him the ball early and often. It's not a great offense, so he's not going to be like late, like running the clock down and stuff. But their defense isn't bad. So they have an opportunity to win an okay amount of games, but they're probably not going to be that great of a team. But again, if they can't throw it, they're going to have to lean on him, especially with a rookie quarterback. So I see him as pretty much a clear-cut number 2. That's why I have him at 6th overall in the rankings. At 10th overall in the rankings, number 3 running back is Adrian Peterson. He's just an absolute monster. 14, 50, and 11 touchdowns last year. His worst year in his career is 970 and 12 touchdowns. I'll take that as a first-round running back. Now, you got to think he's not going to be suspended for the whole year again, and obviously I didn't count that in his worst year. But the only part is he doesn't really get hurt. He had the one season, I don't know if he tear his ACL or his meniscus or something, was his knee, but he came back strong every year since then. He had that like 2,000-yard rushing season, and then last year. So the only thing is the age. Running backs deteriorate quickly, but I don't really know if you can consider him a human being. He's just an absolute monster. He looks like he's going to play until he's 40. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but could he play till he's 35? Maybe not an elite level, but at 31, I have no problem taking him. He's basically the only guy. I'll talk about Jamal Charles in a second. He's 2 years younger, and I have problems with that. So David Johnson is number 4 in the rankings, 11th overall. He should be the featured back in that offense, and it's a great offense. Carson Palmer throwing the ball, Floyd, Brown, they've got a ton of weapons on offense. He's a pass catcher, and you got to think he started 5 games as a rookie last year, and he finished 7th in points. If you look at him, he's a pretty good running back. I've seen a lot better running backs, like pure running backs, like as an ability as a runner. He had 1 game over 100 yards last year. But the fact that he can catch so many passes and he's so explosive and he's so young, you've got to put him in this tier. It's not that hard, I feel like, if you're a featured back for the entire year and you don't get hurt, to finish top 10 in the rankings. You see he started 5 games and he finished 7th. So if you told me David Johnson is going to start every game, he's going to be the featured back, I'd potentially move him up in these rankings past Peterson and potentially past Gurley. It's obviously the risk, I guess, would be that Chris Johnson keep some of the carries, and if they're up in games, maybe they don't want to lean on David Johnson. They're up by 15, 20 points in like the late in the fourth quarter. They just give Chris Johnson the ball to kind of run it down. And also, you got to think Ellington's going to steal some carries, but they have said David Johnson should be the featured guy. So he's fourth in my rankings. Next, Ezekiel Elliott, 12th overall, just in the first round in a 12-team league. And you got to think if McFadden can get 1,100 yards, then Elliott can get like 10,000. I mean, McFadden's not good. I mean, he's okay. He got lucky last year that he wasn't hurt, and everyone else got hurt around him, or got like arrested like 12 times. But McFadden can get 1,100. Elliott can do that. And if you're going to tell me my running back can get 1,100, I'll take him in the first round. So you just have to think like you don't have to be that good of a running back in Dallas just because their O-line is so good. And so I don't have a problem. That's the only thing. If he was on any other team, I wouldn't take him probably at all. But because he's a rookie, I mean, we've never actually even seen him run. It's not even preseason yet when I'm recording this. So you've got to think there's a lot of risk, and that's why he's at the end of this first tier. But he is ahead of all these other guys. So you look at the second tier in this like light blue color. Jamaal Charles 1. He's torn both of his ACLs now, and he's 29. Running backs generally deteriorate in like the upper 20s, and then once you hit 30, they're just done. I mean, I guess you have to think he's got less wear and tear on his knees because he hasn't played for like 2 years. But with the type of running back that he is, just going off agility and speed, I'm just a little bit scared that having both of his ACLs torn, that he's just going to have another injury. And it goes up chances every single year. So I am at 21 overall. 22nd overall is Lamar Miller. And I thought really, really hard about Lamar Miller and McCoy, who I should put ahead of who. And it just seems like Miller is safer. McCoy does get injured a lot more. But here's the one thing I have with Miller is there might be a reason that he wasn't getting used a ton in Miami, is that maybe they felt that he couldn't handle a workload of 25 touches a game, maybe like 20 rushes, 5 catches. Because I mean, he is a decent pass catcher. But maybe they looked at him in practices and stuff, and they figured he couldn't handle a workload like that, and they wanted to keep him healthy for the full year. And maybe he's one of those guys that if he gets 15 touches, he's better than when he gets 20 touches. And that might not make sense, but going into a game, if you know you're getting 15 touches and you're not being used a ton over the season, your yards per carry are probably going to be higher for some people, like Ellington. Ellington's a guy like that. He get like 10 touches a game. He's going to be really good for those 10 touches. But if he gets 30, he doesn't do that great. So it's possible Lamar Miller's a guy like that. So, and we haven't seen him get like 25 touches a game. But you have to think this new offense, it should be a really good offense this year in Houston. Osweiler's a quarterback. I mean, I'm not saying Osweiler's good at all, but he's got Hopkins on the outside taking coverage away. And that offense is kind of built to run the ball and throw to the pass catching back. So, and they use a featured back if they have one. So I like him a little bit more than McCoy. Now talking about McCoy, I guess, one spot behind him, 23rd overall. He is heavily involved in that offense, but injuries are always a concern. I mean, it's every year he's hurt, and already this year they've said he's going to have like 1 or 2 drives in the entire preseason before the regular season starts, just because Watkins is hurt, and they don't want to. If both of them are hurt, I mean, they're screwed. Like, they have no one else. So he's super involved in that offense, but I don't like taking. You'd have to take him basically as your second pick, and I'd need like Antonio Brown, and then I'd just rather have a wide receiver there if I know that he might get hurt and I can just grab someone else later. So next, Mark Ingram. It's really nice having him because he's a goal line back. The offense should be improved upon what it did last season. I mean, they were just dreadful. More at the beginning of last season, they picked it up towards the end, but he's never had more than 170 carries in his career. I don't think he's ever eclipsed 1,000 yards, but he is 26. That's a good age for a running back to like have one of his really good seasons before he starts to deteriorate. And you just got to think, if he stays healthy for the whole year, he could be a candidate for like 1,100 and maybe like 12 touchdowns, which would be really good value in the third round. I think he is actually going higher than this if you look at mocks, maybe in the second round. But I have him as a third round value just because of the injury concern and for the fact that when you watch him, he doesn't really look that great. But there's really no one else taking carries from him, so he's going to be the guy if he's healthy. Last in this tier, the second tier, is Devonta Freeman. He had a horrible finish to last season, so regression is a huge concern. He won't be on any of my teams just because I don't want to take a guy where he's going. I believe early second round. I'm not sure on that. I have him like late third round. I almost dropped him into this next tier. And I honestly might. I mean, these rankings aren't definite right now, but I'm not going to have many of my teams. He's great in that offense last year in the beginning, where he's catching all the passes, and I feel like that's where the numbers kind of got skewed. He was catching so many passes because they had no one else behind him when Coleman was hurt. But I think with Coleman back this year, not injured, he has the potential to steal back that job because people forget. I mean, he was the guy going into last year, and then he got hurt right away. So Freeman doesn't look like that great of a running back. I just won't be taking him. He is young, but I mean, he's got huge potential because he's young and because he's in that offense. But I won't be taking him in any of these leagues. So on to the third tier, and I basically highlighted this as the upside tier, and I didn't even realize that. I was making these rankings. I put the tiers together, and then I look at this tier, and every single one of these guys is upside with a question mark. Start with Eddie Lacy. Horrible year last year. Horrible year. But before that, he was fantastic. And maybe you attribute that to losing Jordy Nelson, and the offense was just awful as like a whole. So he's got so much upside if he can stay in shape. Next guy, Carlos Hyde. He seemed like he was kind of injured last year, and with Chip Kelly coming in, I mean, I'm not saying Chip Kelly is like fantastic because I really don't think he's that great, but you've got to think Hyde's going to improve on what he did last year because there's no one behind him. So he has huge upside. Next guy, Murray. I mean, he was the rushing champion 2 years ago. I mean, he was getting like 100 yards and a touchdown every single game. And this offense kind of likes to run the ball, the Titans, because they can't pass that great. Mariota coming into his second year. They do have weapons on the outside. Dorial Green-Beckham. They got Kendall Wright. They've got Delaney Walker. So this offense has weapons. And if they can get up in games and run the ball, I mean, Murray could have a great season. Another guy with upside, C.J. Anderson. I mean, you saw what he could do 2 years ago. He was an absolute monster at the end of the year. And then last year, it kind of seemed like he was bothered by, I believe it was an ankle injury. But he's got so much potential. And with that defense that they have, it is not as good as last year. It's still a great defense. So if they can get up in games as well and run the ball with him, I mean, he's definitely better than Hillman. Hillman can't carry the workload. He's just not built for it. So if he can put up performances early in the year like he did at the end of the year 2 years ago, I mean, he can be a monster. Matt Jones has the potential to get like 250 touches. I mean, he's a potential 3-down back. I know they have Chris Thompson is his name. That does steal third down carries and third down receptions. But Matt Jones is super explosive. He can catch out of the backfield. If he can stop fumbling, he could be a huge steal in the fourth round as a featured back. Also, injuries, I guess, the concern with just kind of like the physical running style that he has. But that offense has weapons too. I mean, every single one of these guys, they have weapons. And this whole tier is upside with a question mark. Because, I mean, I go back. Lacy, he was awful last year. Hyde was hurt. DeMarco was awful last year. Anderson was awful last year. Matt Jones was the backup last year, and he's got injury problems. You go to Ryan Matthews, always had injury problems. He's the next guy. And Doug Martin, I mean, he had 2 like terrible years in a row. I was lucky. I drafted him last year in like the 6th round in my money league, and he brought me to the championship. But he doesn't get goal line carries really at all. I mean, Winston steals them all. He's got a lot of weapons too, though. I mean, Mike Evans, Austin Seferian-Jenkins, Vincent Jackson, they're all like 12 feet tall. I mean, not really. They're like 6'7", but like they're huge red zone targets, so they can stretch the field a ton. So all of these guys in this rankings are guys that I would suggest as your number 2, or you could take 2 of them as like your 1-2. I mean, I like to draft 3 wide receivers first. So you can get 3 really good wide receivers and then take 2 of these guys. one of them's probably going to hit and be good. And then you take some guys in these later tiers that you can get in like the 7th or 8th round that might also hit. So these are guys, I would take 2 of these. I wouldn't try and take one of these as your number 1 and then go into this next purple tier here that I'll talk about now, just because as you move down these tiers, the risks become greater and greater and greater. And I guess the reward for some of these guys is just as high, but most of them, the reward isn't as high as if you take Anderson, if you take Hyde, if you take Doug Martin. The reward is higher than if you go down here. Dion Lewis is the next guy. He just doesn't actually have a chance to be a top 5, whereas Anderson has a chance to be a top 5. So look at this next tier. We'll start off with Dion Lewis. And I mean, I'm a Patriots fan, so I've seen every single game that this guy's played in New England. I believe he was on the Eagles before, and he's super shifty. I mean, he's very hard to tackle as a small guy. He reminds you kind of like a LaShawn McCoy. Obviously, he's not as explosive, and he's not as good as a pure runner, and he never will be. I mean, he had 49 carries last year and 50 receptions before I believe he tore his ACL. So obviously, injuries are a concern with him, especially being a small guy who's already coming off an injury. He's not that old. I believe he's like 25, 26, something like that. But he's a lot better in PPR than standard, just because he catches so many passes. I mean, they line him up in like if we're going like 5 wide or something. With you've got Edelman at the 1. We'll probably have Chris Hogan out there, Amendola, Gronk, and then it's Dion Lewis. I mean, they'll start in like the shotgun formation with like a running back right next to him. And then they split him out wide, and they see a linebacker's on him. All of a sudden, it gives him a wheel route, and the guy's got like a 30-yard catch. So Dion Lewis is great in PPR. He's going to be good in standard because he does get red zone touches a lot. Tom likes to throw to the running back side of the backfield when we're in like the 15-yard line area. Just give me a little wheel route that has the running back on him. The running back can't catch up to Dion Lewis. So if he stays healthy, he could be a huge steal in the 5th. Next guy, Forte. There's a lot of risk there just because he's gotten a lot of points in the past because he catches, and he's not going to be a 3rd down guy. Bilal Powell is most likely going to be a 3rd down guy. And then personally, I've never drafted Forte just because I don't think he's that good of a running back. So now you're taking him out of that 3rd down role and you're throwing him into pure running back. I might move him down in my rankings just because I don't think he's going to be that great. But 5th round here, he's 30 years old. He's got bust potential. He really does. Next guy, Rawls, huge upside, but I mean they said it was like as severe a fractured ankle as you could possibly have. So that scares me. I think they drafted running backs, plus they kept running backs. It is scary, but you think last year, I mean, he was phenomenal before he got hurt, and that offense will run the ball a lot. So he should be healthy for week 1, but who knows? Although at this spot, you know what? He might be worth the risk just because I have him as 5th round value. If you get him in like the 6th, 7th rounds, you probably won't be able to. But if news comes out that he might not be ready for the start of the season, you could see him slipping down the boards. I mean, if they say he'll be starting like week 3 time, I mean, he could slip to like the 9th round. Well, then snatch him up. I mean, there's no one else in this range. As you get out of this tier, there's really no one else that is that great, that has the potential that he does. So some of these guys, like Woodhead in the next round, I love Woodhead. He doesn't have the potential that Rawls would have if he's healthy. So you got to think about that. Next guy, Latavius Murray, he rode me much. I rode him, actually. He didn't ride me. I rode him to the championship last year with Doug Martin, and he got a ton of carries last year. He's on an ascending team. Cooper's going to be back. A lot more chemistry with Carr this year, I believe. Crabtree, again, I mean, he's going to have a lot more chemistry. And he was top 5 in carries last year, got over 1,000 yards. Do they have anyone else? I mean, Roy Halou maybe on 3rd down and stuff, but I mean, he should be great. He's pretty fast, so I mean, he could break out. But like the thing is, a lot of people were talking about. I believe it was the year before. I mean, he's super fast. He can break out in any play. He had that game where he had like 4 carries for 122 touchdowns against the Chiefs, where he had a concussion. But you watch him last year, he didn't even like break out at all. So he's one of those guys that if you give him like 10 carries, he could bust a play. But if he's going into the game with 25 carries, he's probably not going to bust anything. He's more of a volume play. But you know what? 5th round, if you're getting a volume play, those top 5 in carries last year with no one behind them, I mean, I'll take that. 5th round value, sure, fine with me. So that rounds out the 4th tier. Yeah, the 4th tier of running backs. Going to the 5th tier with Old Man Gore. I think he's like 50, 55 years old at this point. And he is the king of consistently mediocre. I mean, week in, week out, he's going to get you 60 rushing yards, maybe a touchdown. He does catch out of the backfield a little bit, but I don't know. I don't think he's going to be in any of my teams. But you got to think in the 7th round, if you're going to get a guy that's probably going to get like 900, it's not bad value. It really isn't. He's got really low upside. I mean, he's not going to get top 10 this year. But the thing is, I wrote low floor here. I feel like it's not that low. Only low because he's old and maybe they bring someone in to replace him. But if you told me he's going to start every week, I mean, he's going to get 800 or 900 yards. And I guess in the 7th round, as a guy that maybe if your first guys get hurt, you can just plug in. Or if you just load up on like 4 wide receivers early, he's not a terrible guy to have at the number 2 if all the other positions you have are dominant. Because he's going to just get you consistent points, and those guys will carry the rest of your team. Next guy, Jonathan Stewart. Again, he's got low upside too, just because he's got a pretty big injury risk. And he played, last year was like a miracle. He played every single game, and he still was like, every game, it'd be like 80 rushing yards or something. Like, Cam takes a lot of carries away from him. He takes a lot of those goal line touches, so he doesn't get a lot of touchdowns. It's more yardage with him. So I'm staying away from Stewart this year. Hill's the next guy. He's got a lot more upside. I'd say he has the most upside out of anyone in this tier, just because we saw what he could do 2 years ago. He was pretty bad last year, but I mean, you never really know. Some guys, they're banged up and they don't tell you because they want to stay on the field. So you never really know. He could have been banged up, but at this spot, I think it's great value. I mean, you got to remember, he was like a 1st or 2nd round pick last year. Him and C.J. Anderson, they're great. They're great values where they are. So if I can pick Hill up in the 7th round as maybe my number 2 to number 3 running back, probably my number 2 with how I draft, and he explodes into the 2nd round value he was last year, I mean, I could have just won my league with my 7th round pick. And that's not something you can say with a guy like Gordon Stewart. So I think that's great value at this spot. I actually might be moving him up my rankings, not to this next tier above. He'll stay in the 5th tier, but he might lead the 5th tier. So next, Langford. He honestly just doesn't look like he's that good of a running back, and it could be a running back by committee there for the Bears. I mean, they've actually come out and said they're going to ride the hot hand, and I honestly don't see how he could possibly be the hot hand. He just doesn't look that good. I don't know. I don't like him at all this year. I'm not even going to talk anymore about him. I like moving him down more in my rankings. Jay Ajayi. Miller's gone, so you'd assume that he'd take the starting role, but we just haven't seen him yet. I mean, I believe he was hurt, like he had a rib injury or something last year. I think he broke his ribs. Miller was the guy the whole year, and I don't know. We just haven't seen it, so you can't move him up in the rankings. But if you told me he was going to be the featured guy, I'd move him up. But I haven't been told that yet. They haven't come out and said. I don't even think they've come out and said he's like the guy like for 2nd down. I mean, I don't know. They haven't really said much. So 7th round's fine value for me. Just take a shot on him. Next guy, Woodhead. Love Woodhead. A lot more in PPR, obviously, than standard because he's a PPR monster. And you got to think, he's actually like the goal line back. I mean, you'd think Melvin Gordon's like the 1st and 2nd down guy, but as soon as they get into the red zone, they bring Woodhead in. And he catches passes out of the backfield in the red zone. He takes goal line carries, so he gets a lot of touchdowns. He's like consistent. So if you get a guy in the 7th round that has the potential to get like 30 rushing yards, 50 receiving yards, and a touchdown, well, I mean, that's 14 points. Like, I'll take that in the 7th round. I mean, he's like every week going to get you like 5-6 points on a down week. And I don't know. Rivers loves him. Brady, I don't know why we got rid of him at all. He was fantastic in New England. We got rid of him. I don't know why. But I actually might move him up. As I'm looking at these, I move him probably ahead of Ajayi and Langford, but not ahead of any of the other guys. So he could move up 2 spots. But again, in this tier, I can't really argue moving guys in a tier. So if you guys look at these rankings and you say, oh, I like Duke Johnson more than Gore, well, that's fine. I would say you could move Duke Johnson, Woodhead, any of those guys anywhere in this tier but I wouldn't move him out of this tier. Like, I wouldn't move him down to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 6th tier. So this is the 5th right now. Wouldn't move him down to the 6th, and I wouldn't move him up to the 4th. I think those guys have more potential in the 4th, and they're not bad. They're not bad enough to go into the 6th. So anyone in a tier, except for maybe the 1st tier, I wouldn't touch too much. But in any of the other tiers, move them within the tiers, but not outside of the tiers if you want to make your own rankings. So I've talked about now just Duke Johnson, I guess. I mean, he caught a ton of passes last year, and he's got the chance to get like 80 catches. He's more of a PPR play, but Crowell is the 1st and 2nd down guy. But if Crowell gets hurt, he's a 3-down back. And that is huge potential there is an unknown there because I believe Kaepernick is the starting quarterback right now. We don't know that for sure, and we don't know how good he's going to be. But you've got to think, as a running quarterback, it helps the running back, especially a guy that can catch in the backfield. If they do like a read option play and then have him run a wheel route, have him run a go after that, or even run one of those slant things that Le'Veon likes to run a lot, where he's like cutting out for the wheel and then he cuts up the middle of the field for a nice little like 10-yard catch. If he can catch a ton of those plus get carries, I think that's great value in the 7th. So we move to the 6th tier. Is this the final tier? Let's see here. It is the final tier. Yes. Last tier, highlighted in red just because this is a warning. Anyone you take here could be a complete and utter dud. They don't have the upside that a lot of other guys have. But Ivory, he might actually be the number 1 in Jacksonville. If like 1st and 2nd down guy, could take some goal line carries. And he looks like a better running back than Yeldon does. I feel like Yeldon isn't that great. The thing is just that they throw a lot in that offense. So, I mean, it'd be like 1st and goal. I've said this in other videos. 1st and goal at the 1. I'd be watching their games and they throw it. It's like every other team, besides maybe the Patriots. Patriots do that too. They throw the ball in like 1st and 1 at the goal line. But you've got to think bringing him in, he's going to get some goal line carries there. And also that defense is a lot better. I mean, they brought in so many pieces to that defense, both in free agency and in the draft. Plus they've got, Dante Fowler coming back from his injury. So they've like 2 first-round picks. That defense is actually going to be really good. So they can get up in games and ride Ivory. I think that's great value here. Next guy, Ameer Abdullah. I was not on the Abdullah hype train last year. A lot of people were. I didn't draft him. But he's got potential, I guess, because that offense, Calvin's gone, and they are changing the entire offense, but it is a good offense with Stafford, Tate. They've got, what's his name? Marvin Jones as the outside guy this year. I like him a lot, but I feel like Abdullah has a lot of potential, but he's got a lot of bust potential. As you saw last year, he didn't do anything. A lot of people drafted him like the 5th round last year, but there's really no one behind him, so if he plays good, he should get a lot of the carries. Bernard's the next guy. He looked better than Jeremy Hill did last year, and if he does again this year, they may put him in as the number 1 guy, but also he's not a goal line guy. They do take him out. They'll put Hill in for the goal line, even if Bernard got him all the way to the goal line. So there is risk there. Next guy, Crowell, I did talk about. He should be the 1st and 2nd down guy. So there's potential there, especially if Duke gets hurt, and they use him in 3rd down as well. So potential there. There's potential with all these guys late, and that's why I always talk about the RB0 strategy. I'd much rather take 4 wide receivers early and then just load up. I mean, load up on take Matt Jones, take Rawls, take Woodhead, take Duke Johnson, take Crowell, take all those guys late, and odds are one of them's going to hit and be a number 1 or a low end or a high end number 2 if you take a ton of them. But if you start taking like Jamal Charles and Devonta Freeman early, then you have to take a ton of wide receivers late, and then if one of those guys gets hurt, you don't have a lottery ticket running back, someone else did, and it's just not a good situation to be in. So load up on these guys. They have a ton of potential. Carlos Williams, next guy, he has a ton of potential. I mean, McCoy gets hurt all the time, and Williams, he started off a ton of touchdowns last year, and he just finds the end zone. He looks really good. He looks like a good running back. They love to run the ball in Pittsburgh. Why did I say Pittsburgh? In Buffalo, they love to run the ball, so big potential there. Oh god, it's been a long video, guys. TJ Yeldon. He has not a ton of potential because I mean he was the #1 last year. He didn't do that great, but I mean in the like 8th, 9th, 10th round, if he's falling to you there as like your #4 running back or #3 running back, you might as well just take a shot on him, just because that offense is improving and that defense is improving as well. So they might run the ball late. Very last guy, Charles Sims. I actually think I'm going to move him up. Look at the page. I'd move him ahead of Yeldon, probably ahead of Carlos Williams and maybe Crowell, just because I had Doug Martin on my team last year. He had like how many yards did Doug Martin have? Like 1,400 or something? Yeah, I think he had 1,400 and like a couple last year. Didn't have a lot of touchdowns. But the thing is, he's not that good. I just don't think he's that good. I think Sims has the potential to steal that #1 spot, and he catches on 3rd down. I mean, he was a serviceable option for you last year, even with Martin going off. If Martin has another injury like he did or has a terrible year like he's already done, Sims has huge potential. I'm moving up my rankings. He's actually going to be on a lot of my teams, I feel like, because people sleep on him. He did fine last year filling in. You could throw him in the flex, and he had some good weeks just because he actually is a good running back. So that's the end of the video. I don't even know what I ranked. Like the top 35 running backs. I'm going to be probably doing the top 50 wide receivers video. That should be released soon. If you watched this far, I know it was a long video. It was really hard to make as well. I put a lot of time into these rankings and tearing them up and doing research on them, doing rounds, doing mock drafts for this. Please leave a like if you watched this far. Really appreciate it. Subscribe if you're new. Leave a comment on maybe some picks that you would have done differently or guys you would have thrown into this ranking. And thanks for watching.